I would still have my head in the vibe of where I'd been partying all weekend. And I would try and get the records down while I was still in that state.
Mm,
And so I would sit there sort of from Sunday till Wednesday. I would just, all the stuff that had cropped up to me over the weekend would come out. And some weeks that would be, it would just flow. I knew what I was doing. I would look at the crowd's reaction to what I was doing on the Saturday night, and that would dictate what I then went and did in the studio on the Sunday. I realized that when I'm trying to please other people or live up to something, I'm not at my best. I'm at my best when
mm.
I do the wrong thing deliberately because it's more fun. And B, when I make tunes that I want to DJ and play, I ended up making records for the radio or for MTV. And around that time, the whole sort of big beat thing was going back. So I'm like, I'm going to go back and make a house record. And I'm going to make a record that I want to play in my DJ sets. And I felt more connected with club culture than
Right.
with MTV awards ceremonies, which
Right.
I'm never that comfortable, in that environment.
We got the legendary Fatboy Slim in the house. Let me see if I have this right. AKA Beats International, AKA Mighty Dubcats, AKA Pizza Man, AKA Norman Cook, AKA Freak Power, AKA House Martins, AKA Cheeky Boy, AKA Fatboy Slim. Did I get them all?
You get 10 out of 10 or 7 out of 7 or however many it was. Yeah, well done.
That is
Well done.
incredible amount of aliases.
It's yeah. Well, it's over 40 years. They've been spread out over a number of years. Yeah, I mean, I do actually hold the Guinness Book of Records for the most amount of top 40 hits under different names, which is
Wow.
sort of an achievement, but it's kind of like this the Schizophrenia Achievement Award.
Right. That's amazing. So let's go back to the beginning before Fatboy Slim, back to the Norman Cook days. You started DJing in the 80s. How did you get into DJing?
I got into DJing because I had all the records, and I in those pre-streaming. It's difficult to explain this to younger people, but if you went to a party and nobody actually had the good records, then nobody could play good records at the party. And so I had this box of, I was a vinyl junkie and I would collect all the records. So I had a box of cool records and I used to get invited to the parties because I had the cool records. And one day I said, look, I'm coming to the party, but I don't want to bring my record box because all the records get left out on the floor and cigarette butts on them. And, what teenage parties are like.
Right.
And so this girl said, well, what if my dad hires these like double decks and you're in charge of the records and you're like the DJ? And I thought that could be fun. So she hired the decks, and something very fundamental happened. Was I realised that I love sharing my favourite records with people and showing off and making them dance to them, and they seemed to like me doing it. So I just fell into it.
Was that your first DJ set proper, like two turntables? Was this at a house party? Was
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
yeah.
And then, for the next sort of year, I still didn't possess the decks. I couldn't afford to buy the decks, but if people would hire the decks in for me to DJ at their house parties, and then from that I graduated onto doing school discos, weddings.
Wow.
I mean,
You did the mobile DJ thing.
I did, yeah, yeah. I was too young to play in nightclubs, so and people, and it was for me. It funded my habit. All the money I made, I could spend on more records, and
Right.
so, which worked very well, very nicely for me. So yeah, no, I mean, and when people say, what's your advice to aspiring DJs? I always say you've got to do weddings and you've got to do house
Right.
parties, and that's where you cut your teeth. That's where you learn your craft, especially playing, at a wedding to a load of strangers who don't know you and don't necessarily know each other, and
Right.
then watching music kind of music and alcohol unlock them, and by the end of the night you've got the whole room doing a conga, and it's a very good way of learning your DJ chops. And then when
And,
you get when you get to like a festival and thing, you kind of the basics.
right. 100%. And what influenced you to start buying the records before you even started DJing? What was it like your parents you heard, or what made you want
No,
to go buy vinyl?
I just fell in love with pop music when I was about 8 years old,
Mm,
and I was just obsessed with it, and still am.
right.
uh, all those years later. No, I've just always been obsessed by music, and first of all, just being an absolute fan, and
Right.
then wanting to be, but then thinking, well, this would be a good job if I could do this for a living. So all the way through school, when people like careers advisory people say, "What do you want to do for a living?" I want to be a pop star, and they go, "Ooh, okay."
Okay.
And but then, bizarrely through this strange quirk of having the records, I became a DJ before I was in bands and a
Right.
musician.
Let's talk about the bands. You were in an indie band, the
House
House
Martins.
Martins, yes. And if I had to describe your sound and vibe, it was kind of like the Smiths meet Madness. Is that a fair
Yeah,
comparison?
that's pretty on it. Yeah, we were the Smiths without being miserable. We were like happy Smiths, but very political.
Right. And
And
how
the
did you?
idea,
Because you're DJing first, so you jumped into the indie band. How did that transition happen?
well, the thing was, by the time I cut my teeth through sort of punk rock, so I started playing in punk rock bands when I was like 14.
Mm,
And but by the time I was coming of age and thought I'm actually going to do this for a job, like punk was over. But by then I'd fallen in love with dance music. When I was in sixth form, I was in a band with a guy called Paul Heaton. And then when I finished university, he had a band called the House Martins, so I joined that. And I just felt it was my legacy of where I grew up was to make
right.
that kind of music, but I never really dug it. I was never really I really like, by this point, I'm listening to like rare groove, funk and soul records and hip hop records and the beginning of house music. But
Right.
then something very fundamental happened, which was they invented the drum machine and the sampler.
Right. And that's when you kind of jumped into your next project, Beats International.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
had the song Dub, I think it was Dub Be Good to Me. Yeah.
yeah.
Instead of Just Be Good to Me. And I remember I bought the 12-inch. I'm kind of
All
dating
right.
myself too as well.
You don't look old enough to have bought that record.
Oh yes, I did. Absolutely. At Tower Records on Sunset. I absolutely did. Um, so at that time, I read you were inspired by sample-driven artists like Mars, Bomb the Bass. Talk to us about how they influenced your
Well,
approach to sampling.
well, they were the people that I'd been DJing with
Oh,
throughout my college years, and even when I was in the house mines, I DJed in nightclubs, and we were playing that style of music, and but it was a hobby in those days. It was like you didn't get paid enough as a DJ to make a living out of it. So
right.
being in a band was my my career. And my hobby was DJing in nightclubs, but I knew Tim Simonon from Bomb the Bass, and I knew Cold Cut, and I, was DJing, and that was one of the things. I was stuck in this, white English indie pop band, and then the people who were making the music I loved, and the people that I'd been DJing with, and now they were having hits, and that was like, oh, I'm in the
Mm,
wrong band here. So Beats International was my outlet for that, and yeah, it was like I said, it was like the English people could now make dance music without having to put on American accents, and that felt really good, and I was lucky that enough to walk straight in and have a huge that "W Good to Me" record was like number
right.
one for 5 weeks in England. So my career change sat very quickly and very well, and also the dance music fraternity welcomed me because they're like, oh, we knew that that was what you liked anyway. I remember you. I mean, even when I was in the house Martins, they did a documentary about us, and it was about the life at home, and that was me cutting up to, having my decks in my bedroom, cutting up
Right.
Run DMC with the Clash, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, you were the one who always liked this thing." So yeah, and also when I came to a lot of DJs when they start making music, they kind of the musicality of it will hold them back. But because I'd spent 3 years in a pop band, I knew how
Mm,
song structure worked. I knew more how performance worked. I knew my way around a
right.
studio. So I kind of fell on my feet, and Beats International kind of launched me as a dance act.
That's dope. Now your
I mean,
next
all these changes. There's always a reason for them. I don't
right,
just. I'm not
right.
like David Bowie going like, "I am the chameleon. I must reinvent myself." They're all kind of progressions, and there's a reason for all of them.
Let's talk about the next change in which kind of where our paths kind of crossed. Your next run is Pizza Man, the Mighty Dubcats. You probably don't know this, but I was the first DJ on US radio to play like Tripping on Sunshine, Magic
Right.
Carpet Ride. Ghetto Girl was an anthem for me. Like literally that was in my crate for like 3 to 4 years. Talk to us about the inspiration of Pizza Man and Mighty Dubcats, because this is kind of like your first foray into house music, right?
So what happened was I was always on the like the funkier side of things rather than the house side. And so Beats International was much based more on hip hop and reggae
Right.
rather than house music. And but then I discovered drugs. And basically, the Beats International was like spliff music. And when I discovered ecstasy, it's like I want, all of a sudden my mind was expanded and going in a different direction. And nightclubs had taken on this completely different energy because everybody was, in tune, dancing to a different rhythm and a different tune. So yeah, so I wanted to make those kind of records, which originally I started just kind of moonlighting. Again, hence the different names. So I was signed to a major record label with Beats International, but I wanted to make other records. But they were kind enough to allow me to use different names to put out different tracks. As long as I never did interviews or appeared in the videos, I could put out full. And pre-internet, you could do this. You could put out records and no one knew who it was by.
Right.
And it was fun. It was really good fun to have a record. And unless someone, unless someone like you read the small print of who wrote it or who produced,
Right.
you'd never know it was me. So yeah, so that I had my so Pizza Man was and my friends had a record label called Loaded, and they said, "Oh, if you want to make house records, we'll happily put them out." That's how Pizza Man was born. And then the Mighty Dubcats was the records that were too druggy and too stupid for Pizza Man, the ones that they refused. My manager said, "Well, let's put them out ourselves." So we just started pressing up like 1,000. Around the time we Get a Girl and things like that, we would press 1,000 of them, hand-drawn labels that I'd stuck
Yes.
together with little pictures and things like that. And there was just a homemade I don't know, outlet
Right.
for the really crazy records that even my friend's record company refused to release.
But Mighty Dubcats kind of blew up. That
Well,
was a
yeah.
big, yes.
Well,
That
that
was
was
a big
what happened
moment.
was this is another thing that happens is when another reason for all the reinventions. I'll be in one band or one act, So I ended up in a place where I was in a band called Freak Power. Again, we were signed to a major label, but they were letting me do my moonlighting. But then I'm on tour with Freak Power, and I'm getting all these like phone calls saying, "Oh, Magic Carpet Rides, #1 in Germany," and so they kind of like my sort of experimental stuff seemed to be doing better than my sort of more
Right.
mainstream pop stuff,
Right.
which was something that it took me a while. And then also, again, I was still trying to play bass or guitar in a band, and I'm not a very good bass player. And then it took me a age to work out that more people wanted to hear me DJ than play in a band. And that was that's how kind of I've arrived. I mean, Fatboy Slim's been going on 27 years now. The
Right.
rest of them all, there was a kind of a reason that I had to move on. But I've
Right.
kind of found my spiritual happy place in being Fatboy Slim, which is not
Right.
pretending to be writing pop music. It was just messing around,
But
making
but at
DJ
what
based music.
right. At one point you're doing Norman Cook. You're putting out records as Norman Cook, Pizza Man, Mighty Dubcats. You're in the band that you mentioned, Freak Power. And then you decide to do the Fatboy Slim project.
Well, it was
Like,
again. It was another strange little experiment. Fatboy Slim came about because the label that my friends ran was called Loaded, and one of my other friends who worked for it, he persuaded them to give him his own label called Skint,
right.
which would be like non-house dance music. and my DJ sets had this sort of weird thing where I'd got bored with house, and it was kind of very handbaggy, commercial house. And so so I was playing these sets where I was playing hip hop records that sped up, techno records slowed down. And he said, "You should make records like that for my new label. Invent a new name." And again, it was like a throwaway idea. It was supposed to be my hobby. I mean, this is the thing I've learned in my career is like, listen to your hobbies.
Right.
Listen to your hobbies.
Did the music come first, or did like the concept? This is the concept. It's called Fatboy Slim. Now I'm going to go make the music. Or did you have a song and go, "Oh, this could be Fatboy Slim"?
It was more an idea. It was more an idea, which was the energy of house, but with the break beats from hip hop that I loved, with the punk attitude I'd got from my punk days, and then the kind of pop hooks that I'd grown up listening to in the 60s and the 70s. And I was kind of playing a set of records like that. So no, the original idea was can I have enough records like this to play a 2-hour set? And
Right.
I need to make more records. So I was making records purely for me to DJ which, as it turns out, is the best way to make records. To be
Right.
completely following your heart and not trying to impress anybody else and not trying to follow any trends or anything like that. So and that, yeah, as you said, I was all those different things, and gradually Fatboy Slim engulfed all the rest of them.
Took
I
over.
just didn't have time to do. I was still prolific, but Fatboy Slim kind of engulfed my career.
Right. So I read that you wrote Rockefeller Scant, Praise You, Right Here, Right Now, Build It Up, Tear It Down, all in 1 week.
Yeah,
All those songs happen in 1 week.
yeah.
That's like one of the greatest weeks of dance music history.
It's definitely the best week of my life.
Right. What was in the water that week?
Well, there's a question. It was what was in my blood system from DJing at the weekends. What used to happen was I would DJ on Friday and Saturday night, and then by Sunday I haven't like really slept, and I maybe got some chemicals and alcohol going through my system still. So I would just sit in the studio, and then I would still have my head in the vibe of where I'd been partying all weekend. And I would try and get the records down while I was still in that state. And so I would sit there sort of from Sunday till Wednesday. I would just, all the stuff that had cropped up to me over the weekend would come out. And some weeks that would be, it would just flow. I mean, when you say you wrote these tunes, I don't really write tunes. I kind of, it's taking a whole bunch of samples and arranging them in the right way. Right. And sometimes it's just effortless. Sometimes it writes itself. Mm-hmm. And around the time of that second Fatboy Slim album, I knew what I was doing. I would look at the crowd's reaction to what I was doing on the Saturday night, and that would dictate what I then went and did in the studio on the Sunday. Mm-hmm. And by this point, I'm making the records at home, which is another great thing. I wasn't having to pay to go into a studio and book a time to do it. I was just sitting on my own when the inspiration hit and literally making the records in my bedroom.
That's incredible. Now, I feel like you had videos going viral before the word viral, like you working with Spike Jonze for Praise You, Weapon of Choice. Like these were moments. I mean,
yeah.
How important do you feel those videos were in kind of defining your career at the time?
Oh, enormous. But I can't take any credit. It was Spike. It was Spike's genius. Spike found me. He searched me out and said, "I want to do something with you," and then just made 3 really, really groundbreaking videos, which set a tone, but also launched me. This is in the days where MTV did the job that TikTok does nowadays, and so Spike just threw me into a worldwide market, and but in a beautiful way, because I'd sort of given up on the idea of videos. Like all the good ones are being made, and Videos in those days were very, very glossy, very expensive, and they were like meant to show people, how good looking you were, or how good you were at dancing, or how big your breasts are. And I just couldn't really compete with any of that, and didn't really fancy it. But then Spike found this way of doing stupid things. And yeah, I mean, what you said about a viral thing, I think Praise You was like the first viral.
Yes.
Because it was made with the same production values, with just handheld cameras.
Yes.
And it was deliberately wrong. Deliberately wrong, but entertainingly wrong. And that is Spike's genius. He's got such a creative and questioning way of doing things. Right. So yeah, no, I can't thank him enough, and I recognise how much that then sold me worldwide.
Wow.
And got the point across,
Right. But the music was amazing. He had I guess he was inspired on the opposite side, because you're making music that doesn't sound like anything out there. And he's giving you a visual that doesn't look like any other video out there.
Yeah, well, it's great because the video sort of fitted it was as wrong as the music was,
right?
But hopefully as interesting. And then, because that was the weird thing, was then then when I started being successful, especially in America, we'd get the Letterman show, and they're like, "Oh, can you go and do it?" And I'm like, "Do what?" And they're like, "Perform it." I was like, "I can't." It's like it's little bits of records. And they're like, "Well, could you DJ it?" It's like, "No, I couldn't. It can't be done with decks." And so we turned down some really big,
Wait,
TV
you turned down the Letterman? You turned down Letterman?
Yeah.
Dave? Wow. What else did you turn down?
I'm embarrassed to, no, I don't. I can't remember, but I just said to them, "Look, I can't go on shows and perform. Do a 3-minute slot that does the record any justice."
Right, because you would be faking the funk on the turntables. You can't do it live. At that point in time, there wasn't technology for you to do it live.
No. Right. And I mean, thinking back on it, maybe, because, for instance, Praise You is a singer called Camille Yarborough, who's a really beautiful, she came from the early 70s counterculture movement. And I should have got her. Obviously we cleared the sample with her, and she was really happy about the way I'd adapted the song. And yeah, I should have put together a really cool little kind of band. I could have played bass, and we got to get Camille to come and sing it for us. But I didn't have the time really to put that sort of.
Yeah, and that also probably helped the mystique. Now I'm thinking about now that you say that. Yes, there was no live Fatboy Slim performances during this time. I never really put that together. And yet you're exploding around the world.
Yeah, through the videos, because there was nothing else really to sell it. But then, obviously, at the same time, club culture and the idea of DJs as superstars is taking off.
Right.
But it was still, but when I first, toured America as Fatboy Slim, people would thought I was the warm-up DJ, and they were waiting for this band called Fatboy Slim to come on, who would have drum kits and guitars and play Rockefeller Skank. And it took a little while, that was the only bad thing about it. And nowadays, because of the internet, you can watch YouTubes of my performance. So everyone can see what my DJ set roughly goes like. But a lot of people would go to see Fatboy Slim expecting it to be a band called Fatboy Slim, and some crazy English people who just got a very old drum kit that sounds like it comes from the 70s. But that was great. It was, that felt like we were again, not doing the obvious thing, and people, people going, "So you're just going to play records all night?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then by the end of it, they're like, "Hell yeah, who knew that watching a DJ play records could be so much fun?"
Matt, when I listened to your music, and I was going back through your catalog, the one thread that seems like runs through all your music, it's the funk. Like, talk about how important the funk and the groove is to you as an artist, as a producer.
For me, the groove, I would never claim to have the funk, though I did work with Bootsy quite a lot, and he taught me that he always talking about the one. The famous thing was that we worked in my little bedroom in Brighton for like 3 days, and Bootsy's got this thing that he thumps his foot on the ground to the one, and when a groove is working when Bootsy's foot starts thumping. then you know you're doing well. And after 3 days, he put his foot through the floorboards of my studio. And we kept the hole there for years afterwards. It was called the Bootsy hole.
Wow.
Where he, so yeah, I'm always trying to retrieve the funk, but I would never make any claims. But no, it's all about groove. I mean, and I'm a bass player, so I've always thought that dance music is all about the groove. It's about the bass line. The bass line, all the best for me dance records, whether it's a house record or a funk record or a hip hop record, the bass line, you know, drives it. And
Right.
yeah, I'm very much, that's my instrument, is groove.
Did you ever pick up the bass in front of Bootsy Collins and say, "Hey, man, I think you need to play it a little more like this"?
Yeah, no, I had to play it in front of it. I produced half an album for him, and the first thing I told him was he's not allowed to play bass on it, which was, you know, he brought his rig over,
Wow.
which you couldn't fit in my bedroom. And he when he saw the studio, he's like, "How are we going to fit my rig in here?" I said, "I wasn't intending if you to play bass on any of these tunes." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And so yeah, no, I would be playing the bass lines on a keyboard to Bootsy Collins and hoping that he thought it had the funk. I suppose that's probably where I got the funk from. It's like when you've had to write bass lines for Bootsy Collins, that's a crash course in finding the funk.
Absolutely crash course, and a lot of pressure, man. Do you still go digging for vinyl in record shops?
Not really, no.
Nah.
No. I still go digging, a sort of virtual crate digging online for samples, and now we have AI. I can extract things out of tunes that you know previously. But before, you were just looking for a drum beat on its own, or an a cappella vocal on its own, or you know one bit of guitar, because you need that to use to do the collage.
Right.
Nowadays, I've got AI, so I can get in there and I can extract the bass line or extract a cappella that wasn't there before. So it's more sort of digital, virtual crate digging rather than putting in the hours and getting those dusty fingers.
But do you feel because you can do virtual crate digging, there's too much access?
Yes.
Too much stuff.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you got like 30 records you're thinking of sampling, as opposed to you bought those 5.
That was one of the many reasons why I don't really make records anymore. Something happened. Well, a few things happened. I had children. I got sober, and they invented the digital audio workstation, where all of a sudden, whereas before I'd have like one drum machine, a little box of records, and a 303, and it's like, what can we squeeze out of these limited materials? Right. All of a sudden, I've got this laptop. It's got every drum machine, access to every sample in the whole world, and I just froze. It's like, I don't know what to do. It's too much choice, and also it lost some of its mystique, in that you could just do things really easily. You know, everything would be in time, and you could change the key of it. And before, we used to have fight to work out ways of time stretching things to get them in tune, and you know, and all of a sudden it was too easy. And yeah, between that, growing old, becoming a father, and getting sober, I kind of my passion for making music kind of wandered off, sadly.
But you still have a passion for DJing. I mean, you're still playing amazing sets. You're still having that passion.
Well, I kind of transferred the passion onto DJing. Because all the while when I was really making, you know, especially when I was making records for 4 different acts, I was kind of in the studio all the time, and I was just working in the studio, and DJing, especially DJing outside Brighton, became a bit of a like, well, that's going to take up 3 days of my week. I could make 4 tunes in those 3 days, you know.
Right.
But when I stopped making records, the DJing thing, and then I could now indulge that side of my love of music. And I mean, that's why I didn't sort of beat myself up when the writer's block came. I didn't sit there agonizing. I just went out on the road and, you know, played other people's records, and realized that brings me the same joy.
Right.
And it's no, by this point, you know, the DJ is a sure enough kind of entity on its own. And there's tons of DJs who don't even make records. So I kind of thought, well, that, you know, and it takes up a lot of time. I do 100 shows a year.
Wow.
That takes up
Right.
Yeah. Last year it was my personal best, 112 shows in a year.
That is incredible. That is amazing.
And you don't do that unless you really have a passion for it.
Right. No, absolutely. I want to talk about one other record because I think this one other song was special because Fatboy Slim, you're a global star, Grammys, MTV Awards, and then you drop Star 69. People would probably say hashtag 69 today. And your music is back in the raves and the clubs again. Was that like a conscious effort to get back to your roots after having such a massive, successful kind of pop career?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've established now. I'm that far into career. I realise that when I'm trying to please other people or live up to something, I'm not at my best. I'm at my best when I do the wrong thing deliberately because it's more fun. And B, when I make tunes that I want to DJ and play, I ended up making records for the radio or for MTV.
Right.
And a part of me was like, and around that time, the whole sort of big beat thing was going back. So I'm like, I'm going to go back and make a house record. And I'm going to make a record that I want to play in my DJ sets. And yeah, that's Star 69, which is probably the beginning of my less successful record. So it's not always...
I won't even say I will disagree because that song, those vocals, there's a new version that comes out every year. That song, those vocals still live today in almost every DJ set, which I think is amazing.
I suppose ultimately I'm proud of it. I'm thinking in terms of actual hits because normally I'm in a band and we're struggling to have hits and I'm trying to write hits and then I get fed up, so I go off and do something for myself, and then that becomes the hit. That was the first time when that process didn't work because it didn't become so much of a hit, but it did get my credibility back, and I felt more connected with club culture than with MTV awards ceremonies, which I was never that comfortable, in that environment.
Let me ask you this, and I'm putting you kind of on the spot. Who is on Fatboy Slim's Mount Rushmore of dance artists?
Oh, Grandmaster Flash.
Right.
Frankie Knuckles. Carl Cox. How many are on Mount Rushmore? Four. One more. Larry Levan.
Wow. Okay. Nice. That's
for me. They're people who changed how it works. How it works.
Right. Absolutely.
Especially Grandmaster Flash. A big props to Grandmaster Flash. He was, I'd been DJing, playing records, and then when I saw him play records, it's like, oh my God, that's a whole different way of playing records, and chopping them up, but also just the way he DJs. I read interviews and he would BPM his records, and he said, you don't, when you're playing a DJ set, you have to start at a certain BPM and then work up. You don't go straight in with like the party classics. And yeah, he elevated DJing to a whole different art form, not just with scratching, but just how he chopped records up. And probably the most influential record in my career is Adventures of Grandmaster Flash on the Wheels of Steel, where he's just made a record out of seven other records.
Right, 100%. That's amazing. I can see how that album really inspired you.
Yeah, there might actually be 2 Grandmaster Flashes on my Mount Rushmore.
Now you're doing Coachella, and this is your 6th time playing Coachella. Yeah. You played at the very first Coachella, which I didn't realize. That's amazing. What do you think is? I guess it's a 2-part question. Did you see the potential of the festival when you first played it? You're like, it's cool. And my second part is, what's the difference between when you played in '99 and now?
Well, all I remember, because this was in my proper working too hard and partying too hard days.
Right.
The main thing I remember from the first time we did it was sold to me as America's Glastonbury. And that was how the promoters were selling it. Like, we've been to Glastonbury, and there's nothing like that in America. We want it to be like that. So I was like, that's a great idea. That's, that's something, if you're aspiring to that. The difference between then and now is it didn't quite turn out like that, because the American version of Glastonbury is a little bit more corporate and a little bit more regimented, and these days a little bit more full of influencers taking photos of themselves. Whereas Glastonbury is still just as filthy, filthy and dirty, and so it's but it is its own thing. It's the reason I keep coming back is I'm kind of like this sort of like the drunken uncle who comes back every now and then at Christmas to see how his nieces and nephews are growing up, and they have to invite him because he's the drunk, he's the old uncle,
right?
And but it's just to see how I come sort of every sort of 4 years or so, and it's great because every 4 years you notice the subtle changes, and it's a very, it's kind of it's a barometer of what's going on in the American music scene. It's kind of you cut through it. It's a cross section of what's going on in terms of the acts that they book, but also in terms of the audience, the demographic, and it's very interesting for me to come back and visit and check out how it's going and seeing how it's growing and where it's going.
Right. So what does Fatboy Slim, Norman Cook, have cooking for the rest of 2026? What are you working on these days?
Just gigs. The highlight of my year, I'm renowned for playing parties on the beach in my hometown in Brighton, and again, it's kind of like a 4-year thing. So this year I'm playing 4 nights on Brighton Beach.
Wow.
And that's just cements my relationship with my home city, that I love the city that I live in, and they seem to be proud of me. So that's the pinnacle of it. But no, just more gigs really. I mean, I haven't got any side projects to sell you. I mean, 100 gigs a year, that takes up most of my time.
Yes, that takes
that
up.
Does take up.
And I'm sure the 4 gigs in Brighton, that's got to be a lot more work than just going and doing a gig.
No, not really. No, because the what takes the most amount of time in the gigs is the traveling, is the getting there.
Got it.
And it's like a 10-minute drive for me to the gig, and I get to sleep in my own bed every night. So it's very low maintenance. And are
the 4 nights? Are you playing 4 different sets?
Probably not. No.
Got
because there will be 4 different audiences. I don't think there's any diehard fans who bought all 4 nights. No, I mean my set, especially during the festival season, my set evolves as like kind of the big tunes that I was playing in clubs during the winter, and the ones that work on a big stage. So and at a big show like that, you don't want to deviate. I mean, I have my fun in filthy, dirty clubs like Silo in Texas, where I'll be this weekend, and that's where I have my fun, and that's where I experiment and take risks. When you do the big shows, the festival shows, you can't really take the risk. So you're playing tunes that you've worked on and experimented, and they work. So I don't want to mess things up in front of my home crowd. So I'll be playing bangers.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate having you on Powertools. I mean, everything you've done for dance music, I mean, has been amazing. Your journey has been amazing. All the aliases and all the success you've had, and the fact that you're still out there and still contributing is also really, really dope.
You know what? My 16-year-old daughter called me relevant the other day, and that just made my heart melted.
Right?
Wow. I would accept just still invited to the party like the drunk uncle, but no, when you were saying about the journey, it's been a lot of fun. I've had an awful lot of fun, and some ups and downs, and there have been downs. It hasn't all been ups. But I'm just thankful to still be here and still be allowed to do it, and I'm enjoying it more than ever. I think something happened during the pandemic when I couldn't do it for a year and a half. I realised how much it meant to me, and how much this defines who I am. So I kind of made a little pact with myself that if I get it back, I'm going to cherish it. I will never take it for granted. I'll never moan about an airport layover, and I will, enjoy it to its full, cherish it, cherish every moment. And so here's to carrying on that.
Awesome, man. All right. Well, we appreciate having you, man. Have a good day. We'll talk later.
Excellent.
Powertools.